program. Okay, by way of introduction, I'll be starting now. By way of introduction, my name is Yomi Fawehinmi. I decided to do this spaces just in a bit to provide help, provide insight, education, and knowledge for as many people that may be interested. My background is in I studied estate management in the university and then sustained development, and then I got to start working in the oil and gas industry a couple of years back. I worked in the corporate affairs. I worked in HR, and that's part of the reasons why I'm having this conversation. So, not only did I work in the oil and gas industry, I had the privilege of working in HR. I had responsibilities for training people, for keeping people. Part of my roles was actually to be the one, the advisor, the lead for a branded program called the Horizons, wherein we train young petrol engineers, IT, business development people. At various times, I also got involved in recruitment into various functions, operations, PGPA, that means sorry, public affairs, and all of that. Facilities engineer at some instance, where I had direct responsibility around that. So I decided to do that because I feel that it's important for me to share this knowledge with a couple of people that may be able to take advantage of it. So I want to thank you very specially for joining. Now, my that's my background. Now, I studied estate management in the university, and you want to ask yourself that simple question: what? Why is an estate surveyor or someone that study estate management working in the industry? And that's part of what I wanted to talk about. That's a little bit of an introduction, and I'm going to go ahead to talk very briefly about one of the things that inspired me to do this was a presentation I was asked to go to somewhere. I was invited to come and speak about careers in the oil and gas industry, and after I finished the presentation, one very brilliant man walked up to me. He was not a young person. I mean, he was in his middle ages and said he would like to work in the oil and gas industry. That he has heard so many good things about working in oil and gas industry, like I believe many people too will have heard, and that he feels that it will be nice for him to be a part of it. So I said, "Oh, that's great. I mean, the industry is open for people to work. They're interested." And then I asked him, "What did you study?" And then the man told me that he studied veterinary medicine. That he's a veterinary doctor and he has been practicing for a couple of years. Oh, I said, "Wow, that's great." So I said, "Yeah, but I mean, I've worked in the industry for decades, and we don't have any veterinary doctor that works for us. We don't have a veterinary doctor in my company. I work in a particular international oil company at that point, an American one, and I said we did not have any veterinary doctor working for us." And the man looked very dejected. He was very, very unhappy. And I said, so he said, "Okay, all right, thanks. Can you send me my resume?" And I'm like, "I'm not likely going to be able to help you because you're looking for a job as a veterinary doctor, and we don't have a position called veterinary doctor in the company I work with. So you may need to look for where you can get a job as a veterinary doctor if that's what you want to do." Now, that's different from a veterinary doctor that wants to go and do business analyst or commercial, but he wanted to work as a veterinary doctor. So we greeted and then he left. Then as he turned, I called him back. I said, "Sir, I think we should have a very structured conversation." I said, I think I understand what you want. I said, "You know where you are now. You're a veterinary doctor. You know where you want to go to, which is oil and gas industry. But I think the problem is that you don't know how to get there." He said, "What do I mean?" I said, "I mean, you were very clear. You told me you want to work in the oil and gas industry." He said, "Yes." I said, "And you also told me you're a veterinary doctor." He said, "Yes." I said, "So you know where you are. No, you know where you want to go to, but you don't know how to get there." And that's a basic strategic framework. That strategy is knowing where you are, knowing where you want to get to, and knowing how to get there. I said, "So it's clear to me that it's just one missing element, and that's the question of connecting where you are to where you want to be." He looked confused. So I said, "Okay, so let me ask you a couple of questions." I said, "So you're a veterinary doctor?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Number two, my second question to you is that what do you do?" He said he treats animals, all manner of animals, and all of that. So I said, "Okay, does he think there is any animal he treats that will be present in the oil industry?" He said, "None comes to mind." I said, "Think security." Yeah, I said quickly answered and told me dogs. He said yes. He treats dogs, and they will need dogs in the security department in those companies. I said, so can you estimate how many dogs the average oil company has? He said he doesn't know. I said, think about the oil companies that are in the Niger Delta, that have residences, people live there. So I said, does he think they can be up to 400 or 500? He said yes, because at that point, I know a company that had 400 dogs. I mean, it had 400 dogs deployed across the whole country. So I said, okay, so do you think those dogs will need veterinary doctors? He said yes. I said, so that means that we need veterinary doctors in the oil industries. He said, yeah. He said, so, but you told me that we don't hire veterinary doctors. I said, yeah, there's nobody whose job description in my company is called veterinary doctor. But we have hundreds of dogs and they needed to be treated. I said, because the system does not hire doctors, because a company does not hire veterinary doctors, does not mean we don't need the services of veterinary doctors. So I told the person, there's a veterinary doctor, there's a veterinary clinic that takes care of all the dogs in this particular company. Is on Allen Avenue or Kwebi Allen in Lagos. I said, go there, drop your resume, and let them talk to you. That those guys have a steady contract that runs in years and runs in millions, treating over about 400 dogs. Now think about 400 security guard dogs, and you have that contract. Think about how well those veterinary doctors will pay. So I told the person, I said, that's just, I just provided a link for you to know how to get into that industry. I never saw the man afterwards, but I don't know what he did. But I just use that story to let everybody know anybody can get to eventually work in any industry once you know how to get there. And I feel that the bigger problem we all have in getting to this oil and gas industry is, how do I get there? I know where I am. So like, I'm going to use that same strategic framework for this conversation. Everybody knows where it is. Oh, I studied geography, I studied physics, I studied English, I worked in the bank, I do this. You know where you are. So let's then talk briefly about where you want to be, which is the oil industry. And what I'll try to do in the next 5-10 minutes is to describe that industry for you, because many people don't understand the oil industry. They know Shell, they know Chevron, they know Mobil, they know IG, but they don't know that industry. So what I want to do is to help you understand that industry, so that you can have a better understanding of where you want to go into. Because quite a number of people, I mean, one very brilliant man wrote on Twitter the salary of somebody in what somebody was. He said one of his mentors just got a job and in oil and gas and all of that, and people got excited. And I was asking a couple of questions. This is not a typical salary in oil and gas. What they pay in Shell or Chevron or Mobil is not the typical salary in the oil and gas industry. I think we need to clarify that. So that's why I want to describe the industry as against the company. So I'm going to use various things to describe it. I'm going to use three criteria to describe the oil and gas industry. Number one is by structure. We can break the oil and gas industry down into three if we're going to use structure. There is an upstream, there is a downstream, and there is a midstream. So upstream is anybody who brings oil from the ground. That's why it's upstream, up from the ground. All the activities that brings oil from the ground is upstream. Midstream is anything you do after the oil gets to the surface and you move it or you transport it. Downstream is whatever you do to refine, to improve, to make it there. Now, some organizations may decide to put their own refinery in midstream or downstream. It depends. But generally, by structure, we have upstream, you have midstream, and you have downstream. So what are the examples of upstream companies? That's where you have the Shells, the Mobils, the Chevrons, the Ajib, the Total, and all of that. Midstream typically transportation and value adding services that moves things. So that's where you're going to have all the logistics company, shipping, road transportation, and stuff like that. And then downstream is typically the guys who refine your products, who sell the gas to you, and things like that. That's the way I define it. Like I said, some companies call their refinery, like the Dangote refinery, for example. Some companies that have refinery add their refinery to their own midstream. Is the decision of the company, but that is just a way to look at the industry. So if somebody says I earn X amount in Chevron, an upstream organization, the profit margin in upstream is the highest. So that person will earn more than somebody who is in downstream. I know the profit per unit reduces as you go further from the wellhead, right? So upstream is the most profitable by unit, midstream a little bit, downstream has one of the worst margins. I mean, for example, the margins of a refinery is horrible. That's why nobody wants to build a refinery, and that's why we must commend Alhaji Dangote for what he's doing, right? So that's by structure. So when you say I want to work in industry, so do you want to work upstream? Do you want to work downstream, or do you want to work midstream? Now, many people feel that working upstream is a solution because upstream guys earn a lot. But what I've come to do after doing over 20 years in this industry is that upstream people truly earn more money, but downstream people have more businesses, right? So think about it from this point of view. You are an engineer, you get hired to work in Chevron upstream. You're going to earn a lot of money compared to your colleague who was hired in the then Texaco downstream. But over a 15-year period, that Chevron upstream guy will keep earning a lot of money, but that Texaco downstream guy might have 10 filling stations, 10 gas stations, might have a blending plant. So if both of them retire, the Chevron upstream guy will have a lot of money, but the downstream guy will have a lot of business. That's my experience based on that. So you can distribute, you can categorize the industry by structure. You can also categorize by industry by ownership. So do you want to work in the public sector like the NNPCs and the government departments, or do you want to work in the private sector? Now, the last one I'm going to spend a lot of time is you can also divide the oil industry by function. And in that case, there are 7 subgroups that I've identified. There could be more, but 7 are very important. By function, that is, what does each company do, right? The first are what is called the operators and the producing companies. Those are the Shells, the Chevrons, the Seplat, the Ajib, and all of that. They are the ones that produce. They produce, they have production base. Now, they are the best paying in that industry. The problem, however, is that they are fewer and they don't employ many people. So, for example, based on data I got from NATI, there are 67 registered producing companies in Nigeria. Based on their reports, they are only employ 11,057 people. So hear that the operators and the producing companies, based on the data available, 61 of them only employed 11,017 people. So that's the Shell, Chevron, the Mobil. So when somebody says, oh, somebody just got a job in oil, and you see the salary is big, that's where most likely they got the job. But the problem is that operators and producing companies are the most technologically heavy. So because they use a lot of technology, they don't employ many people. Right? So you're not going to, there'll be few people employed, but they will earn very well. And the reason why they pay them very well is because of the fact that they are few. So first is, do I want to go to those operators and producing companies? And I give you the exam, Seplat and things like that. The second is what they call the service companies. The service companies are where you have drillers, divers, mud services, cementing services, all the people that support drilling, all the people that support drilling activities, all the people that support diving activities. Now, you remember I told you that the operators and producing company based on data is only 61. Can you guess how many service companies we have in Nigeria? 8,359 as of the last data we have. So the Shell, Chevron, Mobis, and Co are only 61. The service companies are 8,000. So there are more jobs there. So while the Shell, Chevron, and Mobils employ 11,000 people, these guys employ 28,095 employees. I'm using government data to explain this. So for you to realize that, so when people say, I want a job in the oil industry, or where am I likely to get a job? Between me and you are likely going to get a job quicker, though not as well paying in a service company than in a producing company. So what are those? Now let me mention the top. So I want you to just do a quick guess. Have you heard these names before? Because I say I'm trying to get a job in your and you're only looking after Shell, Chevron, and Mobil. These are the top 5 biggest employers in the service industry. Bourbon International Oil. Have you heard that before? BOURBON is the biggest employer in the oil industry. as of the data that I have. Have you heard of Intel Logistics? I'm sure you might have heard in connection with Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, but it's the second biggest employer based on the data I have in the service industry. I'm sure you might have heard of Alibotin. Yeah, Alibotin is also very popular. There's a company that started in Warri called Awarishe Services. It's one of the biggest, it's the fourth biggest employer. And then the fifth biggest employer is Baker Hughes. I'm sure some of you have heard Baker Hughes before, so you know what I'm talking about. Now, I mentioned this company for you to realize that when you say you want to work in the oil and gas industry, those guys employ more people, but they don't pay so well. Is that where you want to go to? So I've explained the producing companies, I've explained the service companies. Let me now talk about the third category of companies in your industry called the EPC contractors. What are EPC contractors? These are contractors that build, that design. So they are engineering companies, they are designing companies. You have them like Delta Afrique, you have them like Cresville, you have them like Nunabdec. So Chevron wants to build a new pipeline, or Chevron wants to build a new facility. They give the job for them to do to do the design, and of course maybe procurement too. So they just get it done. They woo, Hyundai. Those are those big companies. Now, those companies employ a number of people. The only problem with them is that they employ based on contracts. So when there is a job, when Chevron gives them a job, they go up. So if you're an engineer, for example, and Chevron decides that we're going to do a new facility, yet those guys will be the ones employing, because they're the one going to be designing, they're the one going to do procurement, they're going to do one contractor and all of that. So that's the third category. Of course, you have the fourth category of the guys in the oil industry called the ancillary service companies. Those are logistics companies, medical and catering. Let me shock you. There's an oil company that I know in Nigeria that every day, they serve 27,000 plates of food for their staff. 27,000 plates of food. Why? They have a residential, their camp is residential, where they feed people 3 times a day. And they have over 7,000 people in those camps. Over 27,000 meals are fed. Now, if there are 27,000 meals served every day, then that means that somebody is going to cook that food. That means they need cooks. That means that they will store the food somewhere. That means they need people in warehousing. That means they need to transfer the food stuff to where it's going to be. That means they need a lot of logistics. So you're going to see a lot of companies that hire people that studied hotel and catering management in that space. Those are the ones we call the ancillary. Part of it is also medical. Part of it is also what I was describing about the veterinary doctor. You're going to see them have services. I mean, there are oil companies that have hundreds of dogs, for example. Now, when they have hundreds of dogs, somebody must train them. Remember, not only do you treat them, somebody must train them. So there are companies in Lagos, I know a couple in Lagos, whose job is it to hire veterinary doctors to train those. Now, there are security companies that train the dogs to become security dogs. So the dog has his doctor, the dog has his trainer, who is not the doctor, who is a dog trainer. So those are those ancillary services. Of course, the fifth category are organizations like NNPC, government-owned organizations who are also in the oil industry. Number 6 category at what I'll call the regulators. Based on my last count, we have about 30, between 25, based on how you choose to define what's a regulator. You have about 30, between 25 and 30 of them in Nigeria. NCDMP, regulators upstream, downstream, and also tangential government regulators, and like you'll be shocked, there are departments of Federal Ministry of Finance that focus on oil and gas. You'll be shocked that EFCC also has rules, So, and then the 7th category will be what I call the consultants. Who are the consultants? Those are the people that come to do various jobs. They come to do financial consulting, legal consulting. Let me surprise you. So maybe there's a lawyer here. There are lawyers who have specializations in oil and gas deals. So today, if they say every time you hear Shell wants or Chevron wants to sell and a Nigerian company wants to buy, they always need a legal person to advise both parties. I mean, and there are lawyers that's their own specializations, and they make a lot of money. There are also lawyers who are consultants that are on a retainership. So, for example, somebody decides to take an oil company to court. A lawyer needs to represent him with that company. That I know by law, the lawyers in the legal department of the oil company cannot be his lawyer in court. So they need to get another excellent. So there are lawyers in the oil company. There are also lawyers in the contracting firm that do that. That they collect huge monies on retainership. So I've described the various based on, I mean, you could use other criteria to describe the various organizations, just for you to be able to know this is where this company, this is where. So when you say I want to go to the oil, you must be able to define where you want to go to. Oh, I want to go and become a regulator. Oh, I want to go to operations. Oh, I want to go and to a service company. Oh, I mean, because, so for example, if you studied catering and hotel management, you're not going to likely get a job in a producing company because they have outsourced that service. If you study security services, you're not likely going to get a job. If you study medicine, you may not get a job. You will likely get a job. So one of the things all of us need to do is, based on what I study, which of these 7 areas will they likely need my service? And honestly, between me and you'll be shocked that virtually every professional will likely have a space there. And that's going to then make me segue into my next part of the conversation of, so who works in that industry? Because it's important to now. So if I've said there are 7 categorizations, so who works there? Let me shock you. When I resumed in this oil company, that's early 2000s, I got the shock of my life. I mean, we wanted to enter into a new country, and there was a need for us to get information about that country. And so somebody said, oh, why don't you send an email to John, mention the surname, he's going to give you information about that country. So I opened my email and I wanted to send a message to John that I needed to discuss with him. And so just to know who John was, I had to double click on his name. So that will show his profile, his background. And I saw the job title of John was historian. And I was like, historian in an oil company? What an historian doing in an oil company? So at least I know where to start. So I called John. I said, no, we're trying to get into this country. Can you please assist me? And John said, oh, give me some time. I'll get you some data and stuff like that. And then that happened. And then John showed up and gave me what I wanted. So I was just curious. I mean, your job title is historian. So I called John after all. Thank you. I said, so John, please help me understand. I saw your job title is historian. What does that really mean? Oh, yeah, he said he's an historian. I said, so what do you do? He said, I collect stories and history about the company. I said, I don't understand. He said, okay, did you realize that when you wanted to go to that country, they asked you to come and ask me? He said, that's my job. I am an archivist. My job is to archive history. So if you want to say this company, what did they do in 1924 with respect to Scotland? It's my job to connect you to that. I was shocked. An historian was working in the headquarters of my company. He studied history. Just for you to know, anybody can work in the oil industry once you know the way to get there. I mean, there is virtually no major company I know in the US that doesn't have an historian like that guy. Because you want to, at some point, talk about your history, whether you're Coca-Cola or whatever. So anybody and everybody can work in the oil industry. Please note, some functions are most likely to be found in the headquarters of an oil company. So jobs like legal, corporate services, financing, accounting will likely be in the headquarters. So if the headquarters of Chevron in Nigeria is in Lagos, so you will likely be in Lagos compared that you're in Warri. So if you study those courses and you're looking for a job, why are you staying back in Oshogbo? You should move to where you think and get the job. There are also some jobs that will call them field operations, where the rubber hits the road. You may also want to ask yourself, if I want to go. So if you are going to construction, testing, logistics, please note there are also geography-induced roles in the oil and gas industry, where the geography of the facility will determine whether they will need some functions. So in this case, you are dealing with, so you know that Chevron, Shell, Mobil, Ajib, Seplat operate in the Niger Delta. Now, because they operate in Niger Delta, they are inside creeks, they're inside swamp and stuff like that. What are you going to do to ensure that you have these people ready to be able to do the job they have to do. So that means they need marine, right? That means they need divers. That means they need pilots. That means they need many things. So part of what you need to ask yourself is there any geographical induced rule for this industry that you need to be conscious of at the end of the day? And maybe I will aviation. You'll be shocked. Every oil company that works in Niger Delta will have in its service, they don't necessarily need to own it. Nothing less than 25 to 50 boats, right? Every oil company will have something in that neighborhood, a minimum of 25 to 50. Some will have excess of 200 boats, right, around his operations. They will also have helicopters. So you will see people going to become helicopters, will go to Caverton or will go to Bristol, tell you they work for Chevron, they work for high. So those guys hire them there. There are also security induced rules. Now, because of the IT security challenges, there are also rules they created as a result of that. So there are people who are guys on the ground who do the physical surveillance, but there are also people who have to do things like security strategy. They are GIS experts, for example, people who study geography and went to do geography information study. I help them map their assets. There are people that do things like that. So I've tried to describe the industry to you, right? I've told you, you know where you are. I'm a veterinary doctor, I'm an engineer, I'm a lawyer, I'm an accountant. Now, I've described where you are. So question is, how do you want to get there? And that's where I'm going to stop. I need to respect time. So how do I get there is a question of what are the routes to get in the industry. I have tried to identify 5 routes. There could be more, but these are the 5 that is most common. The first is when you have to resume, when you have to go to the industry in response to a request by them. So Shell places an advert, Mobil places an advert, Seplat places an advert, Dangote places an advert. They need someone. Now, between me and you can't rely on that because that is a bit responsive, a bit reactionary. So if Chevron or Shell or Mobil does not place an advert, you will not know. I don't think it's a very effective strategy. That's the ways I got in. But it doesn't always work because there are companies that may decide that we're not hiring for the next 2 years. What therefore that means that if that's what you are relying on, you'll not be able to get a job with them. So first thing is you want to respond to an application if it's available. So for you to take advantage, you have to always watch out, check the media. It may be advisable for you to subscribe to their alert services so that when they have a job, you can know. Number 2 is that you can also decide to go to the industry by what they call structured training programs. So Shell used to have the Shell Incentive Training Program, SITP. It was a great route to move people into industry. Unfortunately, they have stopped it. Chevron used to have a oil and operations and maintenance training program in Ogeri. Total used to have an operation and maintenance training program too. Unfortunately, they have stopped it. But just last week, the NCDMB and PETAN is an association of petroleum companies, typically Nigerian owned, started an internship program for people that want to come to the industry. So if you want to take time, you can Google it, PETAN and NCDMB partnership. I don't know whether they'll still allow people to come in, but it's something you may want to do. So the second way is you come through those structured training. There are training programs. Some companies have training program for themselves. Some companies have training program for the industry. That's another way you can get in. And then at the end of the training program, you will likely get a job with the trainer. So if Shell says, I have an operation and maintenance training program in Ogeri, you will likely get a job after us. Now, you may also be unlucky that by the time you graduate, Chevron said they are not hiring you. So you will have been trained wrongly. Please, let me mention this for those that want to follow this training route. Be very sensitive to trainings that are very targeted. And I hope nobody will misunderstand what I want to say. The most likely you will get is a training that leads you to a refinery. Now, the problem with training to be a refinery operator is that it's specific to that refinery. So if you are trained to be an operator in Dangote refinery in Lagos, if Dangote starts another refinery in Port Harcourt next year, that person will still need to go and learn to be trained to operate the Dangote refinery in Port Harcourt, because refineries are not necessarily always the same. So when you now say, I am going to on an Dangote training program, and you finish the Dangote training program, if Dangote does not hire you there, nobody may be able to hire you. Why? Because the operation and maintenance training program for a refinery is specific to a refinery. So there were people, for example, that were trained for a specific refinery in Delta State. I'm not going to mention the name, a couple of years back, that the company said, I don't want to hire them. Now, the problem is that that training is useless because they can't use it to go and work in another refinery. They still need to be trained. So be very conscious of that. So structured trade, that's a problem. Number 3 is project-based opportunities. Now, project-based opportunity means there's a new project and therefore there's a need for professionals. So I'm sure you heard a couple of weeks back that a partnership was going on. A new company was trying to start something with Shell. They just got to final investment decision, or what we call FID, and therefore so what that means that construction will start, design will start, procurement will start. Now you have those project-based opportunities, right? Part of it, you should also put your hairs on the ground, is what they call turnaround maintenance. Every time Nigerians hear turnaround, they'll say, oh, NNPC wants to steal money. One of the biggest employers opportunity in the oil industry is turnaround maintenance of facility. I know a facility that when they want to do turnaround maintenance, they will need twice the number of people they currently have to come and do the turnaround maintenance, because turnaround maintenance is heavy in terms of recruitment, and you may be surprised at the kind of skills you have there. There are also those who come in by innovative methods. They sell themselves and the company is willing to take them in. So some of them will come as consultants. So I currently work in KPMG, I currently work in Accenture, and you are working there. Now, I know your company may tell you may have an agreement that they cannot hire you, but some people find a way to go around those things, right? So they come in as consultants, and before you know it, a year after, they are working for the company. I see that happen a lot. So it's something you want to think about. So as I close, because time is of essence, a couple of things I just want to round off on is that one, please note, some companies as a policy don't hire new hires. So if you're a fresh graduate, they will not likely hire you. And you'll be saying, why? Just think about it. I know many of you love football. It's Arsenal that will go and sign a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, and sign the brother and train the person to become great. It's PSG that will train people to become great. It's Ajax that will train people that will become from cradle to become stars. But Man City may not do that. Chelsea may not do that when they had a lot of money. So think about it. Some companies are also like Man City and Chelsea. They are not looking for fresh graduates. They are looking for experienced hands. So know those companies, and based on your status, determine what you want to do. But if you're a young graduate, look for the Arsenals and look for the Ajax FC companies and work after them. Number 2 is that there are some more jobs with contractors and service companies than the IOCs. If Shell decides that it wants to build a new platform, all the engineers is going to put on that facility inside Shell may not be more than 15, but the contractor they are going to hire may have 150 engineers on the other side. So always note that. Number 3 is that international companies pay more than others on average. So the Shells, the Chevrons, the Mobiles, they pay well. Between me and you, some of those figures people mention as what people are in the other, some of them are exaggerated. Some of them, again, please note, somebody says, I got a job in the oil company, my total pay is $10. Don't be deceived by the volume of $10, because I'm HR. What I would put in your offer letter is your total remuneration. I am not putting only your basic. So even what you don't enjoy, that is your entitlement, is part of your total remuneration. So I'm going to give you an example. You're a single guy or you're a single lady, you are not married, but the company says they will take care of your spouse and 4 children. Maybe they say they will pay their school fees. Maybe they say they'll give the health card. So when I'm giving you a letter of offer, I will put there the amount, the estimated amount your spouse and the 4 children will get, right? So when you see that You are single, you are not enjoying it here. So somebody says, oh, my somebody just got hired, is take home. I mean, I tell people there's nothing called take home technically, because it's not a legal term in HR. There is salary, there is basic salary, there is total remuneration. So when somebody say, oh, the guy works in the industry, he just graduated, he's earning the equivalent of 50 million, ask that question. That 50 million, what is that? Is that basic salary? Is that total remuneration? Because total remuneration includes what the guy is entitled to but may not get. You'll be shocked that even debt allowance is part of your total remuneration. As in, when that person dies, the company may say we'll buy a coffin for him, and the coffin was 25,000. They will add it to his total remuneration. He's not going to earn it while he's alive. So you get excited when you say, the person is earning so much money. Hey, always ask the question, is it basic salary? Is it basic for allowance? Or is it total remuneration that is basic allowances and other benefits? Always very important. But on average, the international oil companies pay more than the national oil companies. So on average, Shell, Chevron, Mobil pays higher than Seplat on average. Number 4 is, please, if the oil company is international and also has a union, their salary will be much better. There are many factors that determine how well a company pays, but one of the biggest factors is the unions. So if it has a union, there's a likelihood that the pay will be very enhanced because the union will put it there. So if you are looking out for, check how strong the union is, or how strong, not to mean strike, but effective in negotiating for greater pays. As I close, I mean, one thing I would like to make a request of everyone is that, I mean, everybody should dream of working in the best place. And between me and you, I've worked in government. I've had the privilege of working in government. I've worked in the private sector. I've worked with state government. I worked with the federal government. I worked in the oil industry. I worked with an international oil company. The difference is clear. Working in a Shell or a Chevron or a Mobil or a Total is a totally different experience. And I honestly believe everybody has a legitimate right under God to aspire to work there. But like any dream, like any vision, like any goal, like any desire, we must have a plan. And that's why I decided to talk. So what's your plan? What exactly is your plan? How do you want to get there? While you are waiting for that plan to materialize, what are you doing to get ready for it? I told you I studied estate management. I studied estate management. I attended the Federal University of Technology. When we were in undergraduates, the guys who were in geology and geophysics used to tell us they are going to work in the oil industry. They used to call themselves guys in geology used to call them geomillions, and all of that. So nobody ever thought that studied estate management will have a job in the oil and gas industry. Nobody thought about it. But when I was in university, the name they used to call me caretaker, because people felt that I was going to manage houses for the guys who worked in Shell and Chevron. But as God will have it, I graduated and I started teaching as a university teacher. And then some oil companies had a problem. They needed to hire people to buy land for it, and also hire people to manage sustained development. And so they were looking for people that had 2 skills: land, which is estate management, and also understood sustainable development. I had, by God's grace, I trained as a estate surveyor, but I learned sustainable development and I was consulting there. So they were looking for people that had that blend. They were not only looking for estate surveyors, they were also looking for people that understand sustainable development. And they posted an advert. Thank God I saw it. Actually, I didn't see it. Again, that's part of why we must use technology to know when these companies are. I didn't see it. It was one of my students. I taught this lady in part 3, part 4, and part 5 that saw the advert. The lady had graduated and she was serving in an oil company, and she saw the advert. And then she called me and said, sir, when I saw this advert, they said they are looking for estate surveyors that understand certain development. There's only 2 of you I know, Professor Ashaju and yourself, and I know that this job is meant for you. I remember I told her I wasn't really interested in working for an oil company, and she said no. I remember what she said. She said, sir, please apply. I believe this is just for you. I said, okay, I'm not really interested. She now said, please apply for me. Apply because I begged you. So I said, okay. I told my wife, And then when it was, I think a day or two before I had done the application, I got to church. I just asked somebody after service, please, does anybody know where this company is? One person told me that, oh, it's on the way he's on the way to his house. I said, please, can you help me drop it tomorrow? So the person took it and dropped it for me. The next thing I got invited for an interview. The next thing I got the job. So how does an essay surveyor gets to work in the oil industry? If you check the org chart of the average oil company, you're not going to see estate surveyor. You may see facilities management, you may see facilities engineering, uh, you, but you but you may not like to see estate management. You may see real estate services. So part of what you also need to do is to know what name do they call what you are studying where you are going to. Very, very important, because so you study chemical engineering, you study mechanical, you study electrical. You may be shocked that they have more spaces for facilities engineers than for chemical engineers. So don't say, oh, I will only apply to jobs that where they are looking for chemical engineers. Perhaps you may be able to work there. I mean, a very good friend of mine studied agricultural engineering and is one of the facility engineering managers that we have. I have civil engineers. I mean, we once had the head of our own engineering department that studied civil engineering. You will have assumed a petroleum engineer will play that role, but you must know the name they call it. So if you studied something that's got to do catering and whatsoever, you will likely not get a job and they'll see wanted caterer. No, most likely they may call it logistics and food hygienist or something like that. So I'm going to stop on that note. I hope everybody has gotten some value from this conversation. I'll be sending a couple of tweets just to follow up on this and let people know what's possible and what they can get to do. My request is for us to just take advantage of the information we have shared here and see what's possible. I will be willing to respond to any questions people may have and also see how I can add value. I want to thank you for your time. It's been interesting things um, listening and having to share this. I know people have various experiences working in various places. I'm not saying that everybody will not work in the oil industry. That's just a reality of it. Working in the oil industry also has its own costs, but I think that on average it's still better than working in many other sectors. So I want to encourage you. Your dream is valid. Don't get discouraged because of the fact that you have tried and you have not gotten it. Be resilient, sustain whatever you want to do, and you get the results you have at the end of the day. I want to thank you for listening. For all those that join, thank you very much, and I hope we can continue to have this conversation going on. All right, thank you, and have a great week ahead. And please, if you have any question, you can reach out to me. I'll be happy to be part of this. Thank you, and God bless.